back to the Gridiron Expert here at Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium here in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where Sam Pittman enters his 6th year with the Razorbacks and what could be his biggest season yet with the program. Over the last 5 years, Pittman has done a phenomenal job revitalizing Arkansas football, bringing them back from the dead after the horrendous Chad Morris era, but Pittman is just 30-31. However, he has led the Hogs to 3 winning seasons in the last 4 years, including last year, when they went 7-6 with a big Liberty Bowl victory over Texas Tech. Now they have plenty of talent coming back, tons of new pieces through the transfer portal, but one of the most difficult schedules in the country. One where it feels like he has to at least get the Hogs to a bowl game if he wants to keep his job. Before diving into the roster, you look back at the Hogs last year, 7-6, nothing to frown about with the schedule they had to go up against. Could have been so much better. They had a huge blown lead on the road to Oklahoma State, a game where the Hogs put up nearly 700 yards of offense, but still lost in overtime. They lost by 4 to Texas A&M. They lost by 7 late in the fourth quarter to Missouri, and then were blown out at home to LSU and Ole Miss. They were competitive in all of their games last year with the exception of the LSU game and the Ole Miss game. Even competitive here against Texas, where they only lost by 10. But the kicker was turnovers. The Hogs were minus 14 in the turnover margin in their losses. 6 losses, 15-1 in turnovers. Got to be much better taking care of the ball, and that all starts with quarterback Taylon Green. Look, the offense took a major step forward last year. Bobby Petrino sent shockwaves through the college football world, returning to Fayetteville, where he was the head coach from 2008 to 2011. The Hogs improved by 4.3 points per game, which doesn't sound like much, but they also improved by 132 yards per game, going from 327 to 459. Taylon Green was a major part of that. Over 3,100 passing yards, 15 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, but also rushed for over 600 yards and 8 touchdowns. He returns, as we mentioned, with a very strong offensive line, one that gave up 36 sacks last year but should improve significantly. They do bring back Braylon Russell at running back, add Mike Washington in from New Mexico State. The wide receiver core is going to be the area we watch with the most interest. They lose all of their top pass catchers from last year, but do bring in Raylan Sharp from Fresno State, Omega Blake from Charlotte, and finally landing Courtney Crutchfield, an in-state talent who committed to Missouri but now found his way back to Fayetteville. Defensively, Travis Williams continues to do a good job, an underrated job with the Razorbacks as defensive coordinator. This team last year only gave up 25 points per game. That was the least they've given up since 2021. Now they returned 6 starters, including their lead tackler, Xavier Sori, who had played the linebacker, their number 3 tackler and linebacker Steven Dix. Jaheim Singletary returns in the secondary, one that needs improvement after giving up nearly 250 passing yards per game. They also bring in Caleb Wooden from Auburn to add some extra depth in the secondary. The defensive line, like the wide receiver core, is the area with the biggest questions on the defensive side of the ball. They lose their star playmaker Landon Jackson, but Cameron Ball returns. Justin Boone transfers in from Florida. How much pressure they can get on opposing quarterbacks, how strong that defensive line is, will be very interesting to tell, especially with how strong as Arkansas's back seven is going to be. Take a look at their schedule. It's a very interesting year for the Hogs. A lot of history going to be made. They're going to start 1-0 against Alabama A&M. There's no doubt about that. But then they go to Little Rock to take on Arkansas State. These two teams are the only FBS programs within the state of Arkansas, yet they've never played football. Never played each other. And they're going to meet for the first time down at War Memorial Stadium. What a fantastic, great atmosphere it's going to be. History in the making, and Arkansas will win that game. They will be 2-0, but I'm telling you, it is a trap game if I've ever seen one. If you talk to someone in Arkansas, they always say, you know, Arkansas has everything to lose, nothing to gain from this game. ASU has everything to gain and nothing to lose in this game. That's typically the saying when it comes to the Red Wolves and the Hogs meeting. I am concerned about it being a trap game. Arkansas probably going to start slow in that one, but they will pull away to beat Arkansas State, whose defense really not up to par, not going to have enough to stop Taylon Green. They're 2-0. They go on the road to Ole Miss, where right here in Fayetteville last year, Arkansas lost 63-21 to the Rebels. The Hogs put up nearly 500 yards of offense, but allowed 694. And Lane Kiffin, I think, enjoyed a little too much running up the score on the Hogs here in Fayetteville. Prior to that, though, Arkansas has played Ole Miss very close. Last time they were in Oxford, the Hogs were leading in the fourth quarter before ultimately losing by 7 points. We had the thriller in Oxford 2 years prior to that. Back in 2022, the Hogs dominated the Rebels here in Fayetteville. So you never know what you're going to get between the Hogs and the Rebels. But ultimately, I believe this is going to be a loss for Arkansas. This is just too tough of a game. They have not won at Ole Miss, I believe, since 2017. Even though the Rebels do lose a lot of talent from last year's squad, the offense simply going to be too much for a secondary that still has some questions, and the defensive line that might not be able to generate any pressure on the opposing quarterbacks, just like they were unable to do last year. So the Hogs lose to Ole Miss, then go on the road to Memphis. They haven't played the Tigers since 1998. First meeting between the Hogs and Tigers. Arkansas's played in Memphis plenty of times. They were in the Liberty Bowl last year. Liberty Bowl, 2 years prior to that? Now they're going there for a regular season game against the Tigers, who won 11 games in 2024. But they do lose lots of talent from last year's squad. One of the best group of 5 teams in the entire country. But they lose their top 8 tacklers, a defense that gave up 258 passing yards per game. Once again, a great opportunity for Arkansas's offense to put up a lot of points, a lot of yards, and be the difference maker against this group of 5 program. I think the offense is a difference maker against ASU. I think it's going to be the same way against Memphis. Arkansas, despite the tough schedule, is 3-1 coming back home to play Notre Dame. Just like Arkansas State, first ever meeting against the Fighting Irish for Arkansas, and it's going to be rocking here in Fayetteville, and it's a shame, an absolute crime actually. This game will be kicking off at 11 a.m. Central Time. It really feels like this should be a 6:30 primetime game here in Fayetteville, and instead going to be bright and early for all the fans here. But remember last year, Arkansas pulled off a top 5 upset right here in Fayetteville, upset number 4 Tennessee, ended up being the difference maker in helping Arkansas get to the postseason. Would not be surprised, honestly, at all to see the Hogs do it again. This feels like a major trap game for Notre Dame. Once again, an opportunity where Arkansas has nothing to lose. Notre Dame, a playoff contender, has everything to lose. But ultimately, it's the Fighting Irish's defense that is going to be the difference maker here. They have an elite secondary, maybe one of the best in the entire country, maybe even better than the secondary they had last year. C.J. Carr, I believe, is the real deal at quarterback. Jeremiah Love returns at running back. I'm not sure Arkansas's offense, especially with new pieces at wide receiver, can exploit this Notre Dame defense. Arkansas plays them tough. I do believe that. I do believe it plays them tough. But Notre Dame ultimately wins this game. As much as I want to pull the trigger and give Arkansas the win here, I simply cannot do it. The Hogs are 3-2 heading into their bye week before they go on the road to Tennessee. And these next couple games for Arkansas are simply going to define their season. Honestly, it's really the next 4 games that will determine whether or not Arkansas goes bowling or not. At Tennessee, and 3 straight home games against Texas A&M, Auburn, and Mississippi State. The road game at Tennessee is intriguing, right? Obviously a revenge game for Tennessee after losing here in Fayetteville last year, 19-14. Nico Iamaleava, who was pushed out of bounds with no time left, is no longer with the program. He's off to UCLA. Joey Aguilar not going to be the quarterback for the Volunteers. Arkansas has won the last 4 meetings against Tennessee. They won there back in 2015. I think that streak comes to an end this year. The Volunteers' defense is way too good. Everybody's going to be like, oh, well, no Nico Iamaleava, the offense is going to struggle, all that stuff like there. But 5 of their top 6 tacklers returned from a defense that gave up to 16.1 points per game. Nico Iamaleava was solid, but he wasn't the main reason they made the college football playoff last year. In Knoxville, one of the most difficult places to play in the country when Tennessee is good. I just don't see the Hogs getting the job done. Volunteers win. Arkansas is down to 500. And for the first time this year, I think they drop below 500 when they lose the next 2 games, unfortunately, at home to Texas A&M and Auburn, both of which have their number. A&M has won, 12 of the last 13 meetings against Arkansas? 12 of the last 13 meetings against Arkansas, 10 of the last 11 being in Arlington. This is the first meeting between the Aggies and the Razorbacks here in Fayetteville. They met back in 2013. Arkansas actually held their own then. That was back in the first year under Brett Bielema. But the Aggies, some would say, are a playoff team. They got a great quarterback returning at Marcel Reed. Le'Veon Moss returns. KC Concepcion comes in from North Carolina State to give him a wide receiver 1. And that defense has 7 starters back. And we know Mike Elko's defenses are always very salty and very dangerous. A&M has Arkansas's number. I cannot pick the Aggies, especially with as good of a team as they have, to lose this game. I can't pick Arkansas to beat A&M, even though it's in Fayetteville, not in Arlington. Just can't do it till I finally see it happen. Aggies get the win. And then we mentioned Auburn has Arkansas's number. Someone would say, no, that's not the case. Arkansas beat the Tigers last year, and that's true. They won 24-14 on the Plains at Jordan-Hare Stadium. But Arkansas has lost the last 4 games to Auburn in Fayetteville. They've lost 4 straight home games to Auburn. And the Tigers now have a pretty decent squad. Competent quarterback play finally in Jackson Arnold. You can't help but wonder if Auburn, who threw 4 interceptions last year between Hank Brown and Peyton Thorne, if they had better quarterback play, would Arkansas have won on the Plains? That was a much closer game than it should have been with the amount of turnovers that we saw. Would that have happened? Now they've got Jackson Arnold. Now they've got solid run game. Maybe one of the best wide receiver corps in the country and a very stingy defense. I just think the Tigers are simply too good. Arkansas drops to 3-5, but bounces back at home. They don't see this 3-game homestand go to waste. They do beat Mississippi State, who they beat 58-25 last year. The Bulldogs still a major rebuild mode under Jeff Levy. going to be one of the worst teams in the SEC once again this year. So the Hogs, through all of that, again, one of the most difficult schedules in the country, sit at 4-5, entering their bye week and entering their last 3 games. You have to win 2 to go bowling. Have to win 2 if they want to get to the postseason. And unfortunately for Arkansas, I think they lose their next 2, which will completely eliminate them from the postseason. The next 2 games are at LSU and at Texas, a brutal way to end the season in November. LSU, they lost to 34-10 right here in Fayetteville. The Tigers loaded once again, especially with quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. And then on the road at Texas, they have not played in Austin since 2008. Texas, though, is the real deal, as we know. Arch Manning is in at quarterback. Their defense will be one of the best in the country. Texas' defense last year in Fayetteville held the Hogs to a season-low 231 yards. Arkansas, again, held their own, only losing 20-10. It was close. They had opportunities, couldn't take advantage of them. But now, late November in Austin, with Texas maybe fighting for SEC title hopes, playoff hopes, I just don't see Arkansas pulling off the massive, massive upset. So they lose that game. They're 4-7. They come back home, senior day against Missouri, the battle line rivalry where Arkansas has struggled mightily, losing 8 of the last 9 to the Tigers, including a 28-21 loss last year, where they gave up the game-winning touchdown with 1:53 left. Blew the fourth quarter lead, lost to the Tigers. But here's the thing. I always say I can't pick a team to beat their rival, beat a team, and they've struggled for so long, and I typically do own up to that. This year feels a little bit different, though. The Tigers have some questions offensively. How well will Bo Prabula do transferring in from Penn State? How are the wide receivers going to fare? Senior day for Arkansas, and what could possibly be the last game for Sam Pittman. You can't help but wonder, at 4-7, knowing they're not going bowling, will Arkansas retain him for another year? But the fan base has been so restless with him and actually disappointed that he retained his job heading into 2025. Senior day, possibly the last game under Sam Pittman, fighting for an opportunity to get a trophy in your trophy case and end the year on a high with a little momentum. I think Arkansas does beat Missouri. I think they leave everything out there. I think they get the job done. Hogs win. They reclaim the battle line rivalry, and they finish the year at 5-7. Obviously, a very disappointing season. Unfortunate season. They've had winning seasons 3 of the last 4 years, but with this schedule, it's very hard to find a way for Arkansas to get to 6 wins. Maybe they find a way to upset Notre Dame. Maybe they find a way to beat A&M or Auburn here in Fayetteville. But just like last year when they upset Tennessee, it's going to take another big upset this year for Arkansas to at least reach that 6-win mark. I want everything in my power to see them get there. I want to see them get to 6 wins. I want to see them exceed 6 wins. As an Arkansas native, I'd love nothing more. But I just don't see it happening. Too many questions on wide receiver, too many questions on the defensive line. Arkansas falls just short, 5-7 in 2025, and questions will be lingering across all of Fayetteville throughout the entire university, wondering what the future has in store for this program heading in to 2026. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube, live from Fayetteville, Arkansas, Donald W. Reynolds Stadium, one of the most underrated stadiums, not just in the SEC, but in the entire country. Thank you so much for watching us. As always, please continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos. Check out everything down in the description below. That includes our expert picks and our weekly newsletters, all of that over on thegridironexpert.com, where you can become a member of our GE Nation. And once again, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.